just want to make it clear that when Corey divided us amongst the generations, that one of us was on one side of that and the other was on the other. I'll let you decide who was the young and who was the old in that. One of us is going to camp today. I'm just saying. That's all. So I am a child of the 90s. I was born in 1983. Do the math. That makes me young, according to Corey. But I am a child of the 90s, but I had a brother, born in 1983. I had a brother who was 4 years older than me. So I kind of got lumped in with the generation before me as well. And so I'm kind of right on that line between what they define as like Gen X and millennial. And so I was always a little bit confused as to where I belonged in that sort of thing. But I wanted to listen to the music my brother was listening to. Yet I wanted, all of my friends were growing up, with that millennial mindset. So I told Corey backstage that I have all of the angst of Gen X with all the entitlement of a millennial. So it's a very weird combination to be like, stick it to the man, but the man owes me money or something like that. It's a weird place to be. It's a weird place to grow up. I'm a weird person. So, but for me, when I think of growing up in the 90s, I think of a lot of things like baggy, ripped jeans, lots of flannel, so much flannel. Even on hot days, everyone was wearing flannel. All of that stuff. Grunge music, I still listen to the same 5 albums that my brother, that we grew up, listening to. We'd fall asleep to these, he'd just have the same radio station on constantly, and we would just listen to it all night long. So all of that music is still near and dear to my heart. My wife made me get rid of the baggy jeans, which is fair. That's fine. But all of that, so much of all of that. But there's also some church things that stick out in the 90s to me. I grew up at church camp. I grew up in youth group, and we did all of the crazy stuff where we're drinking Cokes through sock and all that sort of stuff. We're doing all of this weird, youth group stuff. But one thing that will always stick out that I think was a positive, kind of on maybe even the world, was the WWJD bracelets. Okay? The WWJD bracelets. These have actually kind of come back in again, but they made them those plasticky Lance Armstrong type of bracelets or whatever. These were the original 1900s, when you say it that way. The braided ones, you could get them in all different colors. You could, and everybody had one of these WWJD bracelets. I remember seeing some of my friends who I'd never seen at church, never heard them talk about Jesus. They're wearing WWJD bracelets because it became this fashion that was just everybody was wearing them. In early 1990, Calvary Reformed Church in Michigan, their youth minister kind of kicked off this whole thing, had this idea that they would give every single one of their students one of these bracelets to help them remember during their day, what would Jesus do? Now we would just probably make an app for our watch that could do the same thing. It'd be like, remember, what would Jesus do? So, and what's interesting about the what would Jesus do kind of craze was that it brought up a lot of other things. Soon after all of that happened, I went to Bible college, and in Bible college is a really good time to look at all the things that the world and culture are doing and critique it, because you took one day of Greek lessons, and you're I know everything now. So what I like to call deep dorm room theology kind of came out of this. And so, what else do you do after a full day of, your freshman year of classes at Bible school, but go to your dorms and stay up way too late at night and, think about what that means for the greater world, right? How we're going to change the world with our first day of, syllabus classes. But I remember the WWJD thing kind of coming up, because we were okay, what would Jesus do? We can read the Bible, we can probably get an idea, but it came up with a lot of other questions. We would take that question and kind of spin it out into the world of would Jesus drive a BMW? I remember that question always kind of popped up. Would Jesus drive a BMW? And I was I don't know, but we're going to argue about it, right? We're going to argue whether he would or he wouldn't. Would Jesus, wear a $1,000 pair of sneakers? Would Jesus go to this party or that party? Would Jesus live in a city or in the country and all this? And I told you it was really dumb, but we did all of this stuff at late nights, and we would have all these conversations. What would Jesus do? What would his life look like if Jesus didn't come in the first century, but he came in our century, and he showed up here and he lived in the 90s? Would Jesus listen to grunge music, right? Would Jesus would Jesus wear baggy pants? We were wearing sandals, so sandals are a go. We got that one, right? which we got all these questions, but there's one question when we look at the Gospels that we really don't have to ask. We don't have to like pontificate about it or try to figure it out or that. And that's, what would Jesus pray? Or better, maybe yet, how would Jesus pray? We're told often of how Jesus often slipped away from the crowds, and he would leave his disciples, or he would leave the big crowds, and he'd go away from like all of the craziness, and he would slip away either into the wilderness to pray or off alone on the mountain by himself. And so we know that Jesus prayed, but in also a couple places in the Gospels, we see them teaching other people how to pray. His disciples asked him, Jesus, teach us how to pray. We see you doing this all the time. Can you teach us? And so what we commonly call the Lord's Prayer comes out of Matthew chapter 6. You probably have bits and pieces of it memorized. I realized as I was writing this sermon, I was like, I'm just gonna write it as I remember it. And then I went and checked it with the Bible. Really important thing to do. Like you're like, I memorized scripture, go check it with the Bible. And I've realized that I have memorized the Lord's Prayer a little bit in King James, a little bit in NIV, and a lot of just stuff that I kind of made up to fill in the gaps. Like, they're not King James words. It's not that. It's really kind of awkward. So I went back to the King James Version, which I'm sure is how I originally memorized it. In Sunday school, as a teen or as a young kid in the 90s in our Sunday school classroom, I can picture it now with the paneling on the walls and all of that stuff. And we memorized the King James Version. And maybe you know it as well. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. And maybe for you that brought up some memories. Maybe for you that brought up some trauma. You're like, I remember having to memorize that to get a piece of candy or something, like whatever it was for you. Although it's known as the Lord's Prayer, it's really the disciples' prayer. The disciples, it's a template that Jesus gives his followers, a path. Maybe you've even seen where someone would break down the portions of that prayer. And this is how you should pray. And Jesus even told us, don't pray like this, but pray like this. You've probably seen how you can break it down to a simple guide, but we have another prayer recorded from Jesus that might be more aptly named the Lord's Prayer, because it was the prayer that he prayed to the Father. And I can't help but imagine the disciples when he starts praying this prayer that they're not really like, oh yeah, let's bow our heads and close our eyes, but they're just watching, mesmerized at the man who had taught them to pray. They'd watched him go away and pray, and now they get kind of an inner look at how Jesus prays. And so in John chapter 17, if you got Bibles or an app this morning, you can go to John chapter 17. It's the longest recorded prayer from Jesus. And it's not really just a template for us to follow, although it is helpful. It's not just a template. It's like a master class for us to sit in on and just to watch. He taught his disciples how to pray, but now they're seeing him do it. In the most intimate conversations that he would have with the Father, they get to be on the front row to see this happen. Jesus was not trying to teach his disciples any more things. He was just praying to his heavenly Father. And we've been studying these last few words of Jesus to his disciples, and we've noted that like the way that Jesus is talking in this upper room discourse, when he's talking to his 11 disciples after Judas has left, the things that he's saying are really kind of awkward and crazy. Like, to borrow, the famous idea from C.S. Lewis, like Jesus is either actually the Lord, he really is all of the things that he said, or he's a liar, or he's a lunatic. These are just not things that would say, as Wayne said early on in this series, that you don't say these things if there's not going to be a resurrection. It is assumed in this upper room that these men are going to keep following Jesus after he's gone. Now, for us, that doesn't seem that strange, because we've all followed Jesus after he's gone. Like, we've all come to faith in Jesus on this side of the cross. But think about the disciples in that room. For a first century Jewish man, an apprentice to a rabbi, this is really crazy talk. This is the rabbi saying that I'm bigger than Judaism. I'm bigger than this whole system. Like, you're following me as a rabbi, but when I'm gone, I want you to continue to follow you. This is really kind of crazy talk. Now just imagine for a second that Jesus wasn't the Son of God, and that he even wasn't a rabbi, but he just became a carpenter. He was just born to Mary and Joseph, and he just became a carpenter. And he became a master carpenter, and he had apprentices. He had people come alongside of him, and he was teaching them how to be masters in carpentry. But then an accident happens or something. He gets old of age, and he dies. It would be crazy to think that those apprentices or those disciples would go, well, we're going to continue to follow him. Because actually, he's not around to tell you how to be a carpenter anymore. He's not around to tell you how to master this craft anymore. So what you would do is you would either find another person to follow, another mentor, another master craftsman, or if you were qualified, you would start your own business. You would have your own apprentices. And the same was true with a rabbi. Once a rabbi has passed, you either found another rabbi or you became one yourself if you were prepared and qualified. You could become a rabbi on your own. Jesus is not talking like a rabbi who's leaving. Again, you don't say these things if there isn't going to be a resurrection. Remember what Mary said at the tomb? She's talking to the gardener, and the gardener finally, she realizes it's Jesus. Do you remember her words? She calls him rabbi. And why would she say that? She understands the magnitude of this moment. She understands that her teacher, her guide, the one that she is following, the one that she is apprenticed under, is now alive, like he said he would be. There's so much rides on this. She will now continue to follow in his footsteps. She doesn't have to find another rabbi. She doesn't have to find another teacher. And so this morning, I want to look in detail at this prayer in John chapter 17, because the prayer, Jesus prays for the disciples and for his future followers. And as we kind of wrap up this series, we got this week, and then John will be up here next week. But we realize that this journey that Jesus has invited his disciples on doesn't stop with an empty tomb, but it continues on. And in this prayer, he's asking for protection for his disciples. He's asking for the Father to sanctify them, which we'll talk a little bit later on what that means. And he's asking for them to go on mission. So let's take a look, John chapter 17. In the early part of his prayer, Jesus details how he has taught the disciples everything that they needed to know. Okay? It's like the coach on game day where he's like, all right, I can't play for you, but now you're in the game. You know, they go out there. The coach can't control anymore. Jesus has coached them. He has taught them. They have walked with him. They've seen how he treated people. They've seen how he healed people. And now he's sending them into the world. And he says to the Father, he says, you have given them to me, now I am sending them into the world. You've given them to me, they are ready. They believe that I came from you. They've got everything down, which if you just read the chapter before, you're kind of like, I don't know if they've got everything down, Jesus. Like, you got a lot of confidence in these boys. Like in the last chapter, Jesus is like, all right, they're ready. They're ready to go. It's interesting to note that in this prayer, a huge portion of this prayer is Jesus telling God things that he already knows. I think that's an interesting view of prayer, because I think a lot of times we come to prayer and we like bow our heads and we're like, well, God, you know everything. You've been in like a really big prayer circle before where everybody shares their needs and all of that, and you're just kind of like, God, I hope you're listening, because I wasn't, right? And they call on you to pray and you're like, Lord, you know all things, right? You're like, we give all of these cares to you, okay? I think about this a little bit, like, imagine your child is telling you, you have to really stretch your imagination here, but your child is telling you the same story for the second, third, 20th time, right? Imagine your boss, like the lead minister of a church, is telling you the same story for like the 10th or 12th at a time. I don't know who you guys are thinking of, but like if you have somebody in your mind that's telling you again, like what would be the most loving thing to do? For me to, if my son comes to me to tell me a story or a joke that I've heard a million times, for me to go, hey, buddy, I'm going to stop you right there. It's not that funny, and I'm going to go tell your mom, right? She'll love it, right? No, that wouldn't be a loving father, right? I'm going to stop you right there. You don't need to say this again. Look at what Jesus does when he leans into his Father, when he prays earnestly to his Father. He's telling him a lot of things that he already knows. You gave them to me. You sent me. All of these things that God doesn't really need to be reminded of. But Jesus models prayer for us by speaking out loud the things that God already knows. But he cares. He knows that God cares to hear us. Even sometimes it's just for us to process it out loud. I'm in this really great Wednesday morning counseling group, and I love it. It's so life-giving. I wouldn't miss it for the world, except for when I'm at camp next week, I'll miss it. But like, I love it so much. But sometimes if I'm honest, I leave that group and I go, it wasn't like some big revelation. like psychological revelation where you're like, oh, now I understand all of my coping mechanisms and I realize I'm being irrational and it's not like that usually. It's more just like, wow, it was nice to be in a place where I could just speak things out loud that didn't receive judgment back. I can just say what I'm thinking and I can just say what I'm processing. And a lot of times when I hear myself, I'll say something crazy and be like, oh, I didn't mean that, So it's kind of like a self-correction. Just to be in a space, and I hope you have a space like this, where you can say stuff out loud and not receive immediate judgment. I'm a verbal processor. That's why I'm up here. So like saying things out loud and saying them over and over again really helped me. And I've realized that sometimes that's what I enjoy the most about counseling. Is I feel like I can go in there, not be judged, and just speak my mind. I can just speak what's on my heart. And just being able to do that without judgment. And I think, shouldn't that be what it's like in prayer? Shouldn't that be our prayers to the Father? I'll tell you one thing, it's a lot cheaper. And to go to the Father and just give him everything. Sometimes you're processing things out loud. Do you think David, when he's in the depths of the Psalms, when he's writing and pouring his heart out, you think God doesn't know all that stuff already? But our God is a loving Father. He doesn't go, hey, let me stop you there. I got some other stuff I got to take care of. Like, I don't need to hear this again, David. No, he lets him pour out his heart. He lets him pour out his life. Cast your cares on them, even if you've cast it 1,000 times. You've told him the same thing over and over again. So when we jump into the text, we're going to pick up in verse 11. Jesus wants his disciples to know that the journey before them, after he goes to the cross and is resurrected, the journey that they're going to take comes with protection. It comes with protection. Look at verse 11. I'm no longer in the world, Jesus prays, but they are in the world. And I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them by your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. While I was with them, I was protecting them by your name that you have given me. I guarded them, and not one of them is lost except for the son of destruction, talking about Judas, so that scripture may be fulfilled. So Jesus first prays for his disciples. He prays for protection. In your Bible, maybe you see Jesus ask, Father, keep them. Keep them. He's asking that as he leaves, the protection that he has provided for his disciples during his ministry, that it's continued on through the Father. It's in a more spiritual way, less physical way now. Jesus actually uses two different words for protection here. In verse 11, he says protect twice. He says protect them, and I was protecting them. And then in verse 12, I guarded them. So he's saying, God, please protect them as I was protecting them. And then in the second verse, he says, I was guarding them. This is how I guarded them. Now I give them to you to be protected. And so there's two words here. The NIV will use the word protect, and kept. The two words here are tereo and phulasso. Tereo and phulasso. Why does that matter? Why does it matter that Jesus uses two different words? Sometimes in the scriptures, in the New Testament, they're kind of used interchangeably. But I think there's a reason why Jesus flips the two different words back and forth. The first two times he says tereo, which means to guard with watchful care. It means that I was watching, that God, will you keep them? Well, Father, will you keep them? Will you watch them from a distance? It's like when you take your kid to the playground and you don't go climb on the playground with them and help them up every single thing. You sit at the picnic table across the way and you watch them with a careful eye. You're there. You're there to provide protection. Jesus is saying, I've been there to provide them protection. Father, will you continue to protect them with a watchful eye, watching from a distance? Now the word phulasso, why does Jesus use two different words? Phulasso is different. It means to guard from being lost or perishing, but there's a gathering element to it. You can hear the word lasso in there, like a lasso or like Ted, whatever helps you remember it. Jesus was saying that he gathered these men together. He gathered his disciples. He guarded them and protected them. Now he's asking God to watch them, but he's no longer going to be with them. So why does this matter? They kind of mean the same thing. Well, it matters because Jesus is transitioning from this life to his eternal home. Jesus is going to die and he's going to raise again, but he's going to leave the disciples with the Holy Spirit. Jesus is no longer going to be the hands-on guard with the disciples. Think of the times when he needed to be the stand between the disciples and the world. Imagine Jesus not being there when Peter pulls out his sword and chops off the dude's ear as they're getting ready to arrest him. This is going to happen in just a very short time after this. Imagine if Jesus is not there as the disciples are arguing about who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of God. Jesus steps in and he teaches them and explains to them. Jesus is there. He's bringing them together. He's lassoing them together. Imagine if Jesus hadn't graced the sons of thunder when they wanted to call down fire on the people because they were so angry. And Jesus gets them to chill out, and he teaches them that that's not the way. In his years of ministry with them, he was lassoing them and protecting them. So he says to God, I have been protecting them. I have been keeping them guard like a shepherd does to sheep, or like a sentinel would like protect guards, like a protective guard. But Jesus knows that after he leaves, the same Pharisees that have looked to have him killed will be after his disciples. He knows that the same Roman Empire that is threatened by a King Jesus or a kingdom of God will try to silence these disciples as well, which is the very reason Jesus prays for one of the most important things they need moving forward, and that's unity. Look at verse 11. The last part of 11, he says, Holy Father, protect them by your name. Like, keep over them by your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one. Just as the Father and the Son are one, Jesus is praying that his disciples be one. How easy would it be for the disciples to start infighting, to go back to bickering about who is the greatest, or just to go back to life as normal, to go back to the different places they came from, where Jesus called them from, to walk their own path away from the tomb. It's such an important reminder for us. If our goal is to follow Jesus, we need to work for unity. Jesus knew that this was a surefire way for the devil to tempt us. Make it about what's different. Always call out what's different. Our world is so good at this. Like, what divides you? What makes you an individual? What makes you different than everyone else? Is it race or power or money or status? Make it about all of these things. The neighborhood you live in. Notice Jesus doesn't pray for uniformity, which we often confuse with unity. Uniformity and unity are not the same thing. He doesn't say, Father, would you please make them all the same? But he prays, would you make them one? And it's a good thing that he prays that too, because we are not all the same. We all come from different places. We all have different worldviews at times. We have different places we came from, things that we were brought up with. We come from different backgrounds, families of origin, all of these sort of things. But Jesus is praying that we become one. Those are different. I love how Skye Jitani illustrates it in his book, What If Jesus Was Serious About the Church, is the name of the book. What if Jesus really meant what he said? And he has this doodle that he draws, I can bring up on the screen, the difference between uniformity and unity. Uniformity, you notice like all of the circles around the outside are the same color, right? They're all this orange kind of color. I can't really see very well. I'm not that old. But then all the lines in the middle are connecting everyone in all these different ways. And so if you were in a uniformity community, a uniformed community, like think of that, like you're all wearing the same stuff, you're all living in the same neighborhoods, you're all like, uniformity actually comes pretty natural to us. It's people who are like us. It's people who believe the same things exactly as us. It's like, you know, but unity is different. Uniformity, we move to neighborhoods that feel comfortable. We hang out with people that look like us. You know, certain parts of town are maybe off limits to us, or we think, I wouldn't move there. And we do this with our churches as well. Some churches are known for different reasons. Some churches are known as the young adult church or the young family church or the old people church or whatever it is. We divide up, and, you know, some are country churches, some are urban churches, progressive churches, liberal churches, conservative churches, traditional churches. The list goes on and on and on. Isn't it interesting? I could probably sit up here and just continue on and on about all the ways that we're different. But Jesus isn't looking at his disciple group and going, I want you to all be exactly the same. But he is praying, I want you to be one. Different people, different backgrounds, classes, race, money, language, all unified as followers of Jesus. How does this work? I mean, just think of the disciples alone. Think about that group. A handful of fishermen, a tax collector, a zealot. This sounds like the start of a really bad first century joke, right? They're all walking into town together. It's like, what is happening here? Some arguing siblings, a guy who just comes out of the woods with John the Baptist who eats like bugs and wears fur, like all this sort of stuff. Like, this is a weird, eclectic group of people. They were not the same. But Jesus he's not trying to change that. He wants them to love each other despite their differences. We're different on so many levels. But we have this union in truth that comes from Jesus. All throughout scriptures, we see this call. Peter writes, 1 Peter chapter 3, have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. This is bringing the body together. Colossians chapter 3, verse 4, Paul writes, above all these things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. The great thing about harmony is that it's not all the same note. That's obnoxiousness, right? It just gets one note louder and louder, but harmony is different notes singing together. That's the difference there. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 gives a list of the things that God hates, and one of those is anyone who stirs up trouble among the faithful. Jesus is praying that they would be protected from disunity. Titus chapter 3 gives the church discipline model. If a person is causing division in the community, warn him once. And if necessary, warn him twice. After that, strike 3, avoid him completely. Excommunication because of division. That's how much of a thing it is for the early church. That's how big of a deal it is, and it was to Jesus. See, Jesus is not calling these disciples to all become clones of each other, but to be united in the truth that he has just given to them. He says, Father, I've given them your truth. But how is that even possible? How's that going to be possible? How was it possible for a first century group of 11 men to agree on anything? Let's try that sometime. Like a focus group of 11 dudes in one room, try to get them to agree on everything, right? Not going to happen, right? Just mention a football team, right? There's or some stats or something like that. I don't know. Talk about the best way to barbecue a steak, right? Some of you are like, you would never barbecue a steak, right? Like, we can't agree on anything, right? We don't have unity on very much at all in this world. So what we tend to do, our best efforts are just to stop hanging out with the people who don't agree with us, to stop talking to the people we know differ from us. We mute people online, and I've muted lots of people online, but this seems to be our go-to, right? We're canceling and filtering and turning off, turning our churches and our literal lives into echo chambers where all we hear is just people that are in our same group of theologically and socially. But Jesus' prayer gives us a better way to see through the chaos, because that's what the world is doing. So Jesus is going to call his disciples to something different, to seek unity in something that really matters. Look at verse 13. He says, now I'm coming to you, and I speak these things in the world so that they may have my joy completed in them. Jesus says, I want them to complete my joy. And that sounds a little bit like he's saying, I'm giving them a bunch of Legos that they're going to have to put together, right? You're going to have to figure out this joy thing. It sounds incomplete, that the joy of Jesus is incomplete, and when he gives it to the disciples, it will be made complete in them. And it's just really just a translation error, the way the words get shifted around. So I always like to compare with different translations, and maybe you'll notice when I preach, sometimes it's why is he using all these different translations and all that sort of stuff? Sometimes when I'm writing a sermon, it's 4 to 5 different translations. And sometimes it's just because I'll read a scripture and be I don't understand that. I'm gonna give you one here in a little bit that I just my whole life we were quoting and singing about, and it just blew right over my head. But this one in particular, it almost sounds man, is he saying I'm going to give them a joy, but they're going to have to do some work to complete it. So I went to the Amplified Version. Amplified Version is a place I like to go a lot because it's got a lot of parentheses and this is what this means, this is what this means. It feels a lot like my brain. And so there's a lot of squirrels and rabbit trails and all that sort of stuff. So just bear with me. Here's what the Amplified Version of John 17:13 says. So that they may experience my joy, made full and complete and perfected within them. Parentheses, filling their hearts with my delight. Jesus has this perfect joy that he wants to impart onto the disciples. He says, God, would you take this complete joy that I have and give it to them? You want to talk about what seems like a churchy answer? Wait, the answer to all of your problems, are you listening? Be more joyful, right? Wow, thanks, Alan. Thanks for that. Just be more joyful. But that's what Jesus prays. But it's not just make yourself be more joyful. He says, I'm giving you my joy. I know that Wayne preached on this a couple weeks ago, but Jesus actually prays for it multiple times. He talks about it multiple times in that room. And if Jesus talks about it twice, I think we can talk about it twice. So the key to understanding what complete joy is to really understand what joy is. Happiness and joy are not the same thing. We get those mixed up and confused. We kind of link those two together. The joy of the Lord is my strength. When I'm happy, I feel the strength of the Lord. That's kind of how we feel. Well, Jesus' prayer is not for that. Always being right is not joy. Always getting what you want is not joy, although that can make you happy. The joy is deeper, longer. It's a longer view of God's mercies on your life. And I think you could say that one true mark of a follower of Jesus is a life of joy in spite of circumstances, in spite of happiness. Like, I don't have happiness in my life, but do I have joy? Joy is like the time capsule of God's mercy on your life. Remember time capsules? Like, I'm sure they're digging up some or whatever. And I was doing this little thought process in my head, which is not smart right before you preach, because I'm like, I don't know if this will work. But imagine whatever it is, 100 years down the road, and they open up the year 2020 time capsules, right? How weird of a world are they going to be stepping into? Like, there's going to be like these medical masks and some webcams. You know, there's going to be murder hornets. I don't know. Remember murder hornets? Like, that was the least crazy thing about 2020, was that there were murdering hornets. Just let that sink in, all right? That's going to be weird. But I remember when I was in high school, we opened up it's like from back in the 80s or something, ancient times, right? They opened up these time capsules, and maybe it was earlier than that. I wasn't paying attention, surprise. But there's something about time capsules. They take you back to a time. It's like, I remember they open up a time capsule and they pull out like newspaper articles, and they're like, what's the password to the tablet? Like, what do we do with this? Newspapers, did you guys actually read these things? All of this stuff, like all of the things we put in time capsules. But that's what a time capsule does. It takes you back to a time that's just like simpler. Maybe brings back good memories. Have you ever been like going through the attic or going through the closet, or maybe going through your garage, cleaning stuff out, and you come across the shoebox, and you immediately know what's in that shoebox? You're like, why do I still have this shoebox, right? And you start going through all the letters, and you start going through all the cards, and we have one, from our wedding, all the cards that people gave us. We took all the money out, didn't read the cards, but we come back to them later, right? So you ever been there? Like, it stops me every time. I was just sitting up in the attic, just like sweat all over me. It was like, why is this taking so long? It's because I found something. It just kind of takes me back to a time. We get so caught up in the day-to-day, it's hard to find joy. But Jesus says, I'm saying these things out loud in the world, in person, on earth, so that they have this keepsake. I don't know what the disciples were doing at this time. I don't know if they had their heads bowed and their eyes closed. Probably not. They're probably watching Jesus pray, like, oh my goodness, this is actually happening. Like, look, he's actually here with us. This is such a moment. And so this is an earnest plea to the Father, but it's also a time capsule for his followers. And here we are, thousands of years later, opening up these time capsules every single week with the Word, and we read the Scriptures, we read his promises. He longs for us to have this complete joy. But we often confuse joy with success. If I follow Jesus, if I say my prayers, if I give enough money, that I'm going to be protected from harm, that nothing in my life is going to go wrong. And it's interesting. I mean, you can just look at the disciples themselves. That's not what they would experience. It's like, if you just keep following Jesus is actually telling them their life is about to get a lot harder. When you think about the protection that God offers, if you think that it's only manifested in the wealth or a healthy lifestyle, this is what we call the prosperity gospel. Prosperity gospel. And it's, can I just tell you briefly what the prosperity gospel did to me as I was battling cancer as a teenager and then again in my early 20s. The prosperity gospel was alive and well, meaning Jesus following people. It wasn't just the people outside who were like, yeah, I thought you had faith. I thought you had a God. Like, he would never let this happen to you. No, those people in the church, close to me, who would say just things that I'm like, I don't know if that lines up with Scripture. I was accused of having some sort of secret sin in my life that caused all my sickness. I was accused of not praying hard enough, or that my cancer was a demon that needed to be casted out of me. And I went to those prayer meetings. I didn't know it was a prayer meeting. I thought we were playing basketball, but I walked in. It was like an intervention. And I was like, wait, what are we doing here? And everybody gathered around me, I was never been more uncomfortable in my life. But I'm an extrovert, but I don't want people to touch me. So lots of hands on me and prayers and all of this sort of stuff. And, they're trying to cast out the cancer. All of this stuff is happening. And I'm like, is is this what I believe? Like, is this what I believe? Because I still had to go to treatment after that. Like, I still had to get hooked up to the chemo machine. I still had to go and have surgery. I still had to do all that. Like, I believe in the healing power of God. And I believe that if God wanted to take my cancer away in that moment, at that time, he totally could have done that. And he has done that. But if everything that we are basing our faith on is about health and wealth, what happens when the wealth doesn't come? What happens when the well runs dry? What happens when the health is not there or the health fails? I love how Bob Coughlin puts it in his book, The True Worshipers. The purpose of faith isn't to secure wealth and health, but to remind ourselves that in Jesus Christ, God has already given us everything. He's already given us everything. And a faith built on health has a hard time surviving sickness. A faith built on wealth has a hard time surviving recession and an empty bank account. A faith built on happiness has a hard time surviving a crisis of depression and anxiety. But if your faith has a foundation of joy, a treasure trove of blessings, a time capsule filled with God's goodness, there's no cancer that can take joy away. Happiness? Yes, cancer can and will take away happiness. You don't see a lot of people just laughing and joking hooked up to a chemo machine. They exist, but they're psychopaths. No one's happy in that moment. But cancer can't touch joy. Poverty can't touch joy. Inflation can't touch joy. Elections can't touch joy. Social media platforms can't touch joy. Jesus wants his complete joy imparted into his disciples. He's headed for the cross, which is a life ending in pain. The disciples are headed for trouble, which is not going to make their lives easier. So how can we approach the struggle in this life with joy? Now, like I said, I was supposed to learn this as a kid. We sang a hymn. It was based on 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 2. I'm just going to read the words to you, and you tell me if you understand it. I was 7, okay? I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep which I have committed unto him against that day. We sang that song over and over and over again, and I don't think I ever, it didn't ever make it to my heart. What does that even mean? What does the word believed mean, right? Like, I'm not good at grammar or sentences or any of that stuff, but I'm pretty sure that's a run-on sentence, and please don't make me diagram it, right? So again, I went to another version. I went to a little more simpler, 8th grade reading level for me. That's helpful. The NLT, New Living Translation. And it says this. It says, "For I know the one whom I trust, and I am sure that he is able to guard what I have entrusted to him until the day of his return." You want to take a wild guess at what word Paul uses for guard there? It's phulasso. The word phulasso. The word phulasso, that his complete joy comes from knowing and keeping his promises. These disciples didn't need a pep talk sermon. They didn't need bigger swords or more armor. They needed, if they were going to be a city on a hill, a light in a dark world, they needed joy. Because it's the joy, the complete joy of Christ that would set them apart from every other power with a louder voice or a bigger following. And so they didn't need that. What they needed was to know that they had joy. So they would be a people suffering, striving, struggling alongside every other soul, yet filled with the complete joy of Christ. Jesus prays for his disciples to be kept, their unity protected, that Jesus has lassoed them in together, but that God would keep watchful care over them. But secondly, he prays for the Father to sanctify them. Look at verse 17. "Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. As you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. I sanctify myself for them, so that they may also be sanctified by the truth." Sanctified is one of those words that we kind of throw around at church sometimes. I grew up hearing it a lot. But it's still kind of stuffy. Still seems very churchy. Sanctify, like holier than thou type. But really what sanctify means is just simply means to set aside or to make holy. To take something and set it aside. Jesus prays that his disciples be made holy. I like to describe sanctification like this. Looking more like Jesus every day after the first day. Every day after the first day you meet Jesus. Did you lay your head on that pillow at night? You're like, did I look more like Jesus today or less like Jesus today? That kind of dictates the way you live your next day. It's kind of like the bracelet. What would Jesus do? It's helping you point towards sanctification. As Paul would say, whoa, what happened there? Just lost it all. All right, we're going to be done early or really late. There we go. As Paul would say, it's like we're a mirror reflecting the glory of God. And we're being transformed from glory to glory. As every day you look in the Jesus mirror and you're like, do I look more like him or less like him? What do I need to do today to look more like Jesus? We're reminded throughout Scripture that Christ has saved us. This is not about salvation talk. Okay? This is not what you do to get saved. It's what you do out of the joy of your salvation. It's this process, this progress of sanctification. This is what Paul would say, I haven't already obtained it, but I press on towards the goal. Paul's not talking about his salvation. Paul was secure. He said, there's nothing that could separate me from the love of God. But Paul was talking about, I'm not quite there yet. I'm still running. I'm still pressing on towards the goal. What's the goal? To look more like Jesus every day, since the first day. Jesus prays that we're sanctified in two ways, to be set aside by the word and to be set aside from the world. If we look at those just briefly, he says, Father, sanctify them by your truth, by the word. Your word is truth. He doesn't let them guess what is the truth. God, sanctify them by their truth. I hope they can figure it out. They're going to go out there in the world and have a bunch of truths thrown at them. And they can just in a world where we live, where truth is very subjective, like whatever your world is. Truth is, truth is a social media platform. Truth is your truth. Truth is whatever you feel that day. Truth is someone, if you tell somebody, I'm being sanctified by the truth. Try that at work, on Tuesday morning. Be like, how was your weekend? Oh, just good. Just being sanctified by the truth, Some of you may remember Woody Wilkinson. He's a professor at Ozark Christian College, but he was a minister here in the early days in Northside. And every time you would see him on campus, you'd be like, how you doing, Woody? And he would say, saved, sanctified, and full of the Holy Ghost. It would be like, so is that fine? Is that good or bad? Like I think I know what you mean. And so he was just, teaching while he wasn't teaching. But if you knew him, you knew that's what he meant. He was being formed into the likeness of Jesus every single day. To be sanctified by the word means that, you listen to the words, that you are in the words, you are becoming the words. So they are there to guide us. But he also says to be set aside from the world. We confuse this one a lot, from the world. Look at verse 14. The world has hated them because they are not of the world. Jesus says of his disciples, just as I am not of the world, I'm praying not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. The answer is to not run and hide from the world. In the early 3rd century, the desert fathers and mothers, which you can read a lot of really great contemplative stuff about, they were just so much rich stuff there. But they fled to the deserts of Egypt in the 3rd century to remove themselves from the world's influences. This is a move that brought much thought and theology to the Christian world. We can still read a lot of their writings, really deep thinking stuff there. But it did very little in the realm of evangelism, as you can imagine. What are we going to do with the world? Let's get away from it. Let's run to the desert, right? Let's get away from everything. Let's remove all of these negative influences from our lives, build a wall, go away from everybody else. And they catch a bad rap over church history for just abandoning culture. But we have our own forms of running to the desert. Over the years, I've heard calls for Christians to abandon cities, to abandon public schools, abandon the music industry, the government, Hollywood, because they're all too far gone. Let's all just run to the desert. Let's run to our churches and just all agree and be uniform and just get away. We don't want the influences of the world. Jesus says, I don't pray that you take them out of the world, but that you sanctify them, that you set them aside. There's the other extreme as well. Maybe you have no problems being in the world. Maybe for you that's not a thing. Some of us we're like we got to keep all the influence out of the world. Maybe for you I don't have a problem being in the world. But then you get a little bit squishy on truth. You look a little bit more like the culture than you would want to. We want to spend as much time with unbelievers and those who are outside of the church or outside of the love of God. But because we want to save them, right? We want to be in the world. But we just end up looking exactly like the world. I love the introduction to the book, The Deeply Formed Life by Rich Villodas. He gives us a little bit of what is lacking when you look one way or the other. And I will say he uses the words conservative and liberal in this quote, but he's thinking theologically, not necessarily politically. I just didn't want you to, like walls and, alarms to go off, that sort of stuff. But in a theological sense, we build these walls either around be in the world or be of the truth. You have to pick one, right? Here's what he says. In some conservative traditions, transformation is about getting the right theology in one's head while overlooking the inner work that God wants to do. Yet in some progressive traditions, transformation is about right action and engagement within the world, but often at the expense of personal humility and mercy. See, what Jesus asks us to do is to walk this line of in the world but not of the world, and it's not a simple task. He's asking the Father to sanctify his disciples, to set them aside, to walk the same path as he is walking. I've been sanctified, so sanctify them, which comes with a lot of pain and bruises of being in the world. Because you can just walk right into the world and be of the world, no problem. They will accept you. But Jesus says that they be set aside. To close, I want to share just a little bit of a frivolous testimony with you. But I've got a thing with shoes. Okay, maybe if you see me around, you know that. I really like having nice shoes. I like sneakers. But here's the problem. There's a lot of problems. Okay, I'm sure you could tell me all the problems. But the main problem is I like sneakers, but I want to retire before I'm 85. I don't know if you know how expensive nice sneakers are. So in the event that I save up enough money for my birthday, or, my wife gives me a gift like the sneakers that I have on today, I got for my birthday last year, I will take such good care of them because I like them. And we all do this with all kinds of things. I mean, like, you guys are judging me. I see all the judgment eyes, all right? That's fine. But we all do this, right? You got something that you take really good care of because you either invested a lot of money into it, or you it's really special to you, like a keepsake or something like that. We all do that. We want to keep it clean. We want to whatever. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's your house. Maybe it's your car. Maybe it's your kids. I don't know. Whatever you like. But it'll get there. I got this thing where I will just take such good care of my shoes. As a matter of fact, some people always ask me, like, are those new shoes? And I'm like, actually, I've had these for like 3 years, which makes it sound like, like I've got just a new pair of shoes to wear every day, right? It's like, I just keep them really clean. When they start to get dirty, I will actually look at the weather, not so that I can wear a raincoat or take an umbrella, but that I don't wear the wrong shoes and get them dirty, right? So I was even thinking this morning, like, do I want them to see my Air Max shoes today? Because I got to walk across that parking lot in the rain. And so I ran, and there's something about getting less wet or more wet. I don't know. That's for someone else to figure out. But so I'm a little particular. And there's a little bit of if you want to use a word from the text, like sanctification, set-asideness, right? I got some certain shoes I'll wear on certain days. Some things I won't. I've got work boots. I've got whatever. And so I know some of you guys are looking at me like I have work boots and church boots, and they're the same boots, right? I get that. That's fine. It's just a thing. But inevitably, those shoes will get dirty, right? And there'll be one time when I'm like, I'm not going to clean them this time. I'm not going to clean them the next time. And then they become what? They become the lawn shoes, right? Or the river shoes is what we used to have growing up. Like, you just take them to wear them in the river. And so, but there's one, can I say coveted? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. That's a 10 commandment. I'm going to get in trouble. But there's one pair of shoes that if I were to be given, or if I were to buy, once I apologize to my wife for our retirement accounts, I would take such good care of them. Like, when we talk about sanctification and set aside and those things, the Jordan 4s, okay? Jordans. Now, let me just explain, all right? I'm not a Jordan guy, okay? I'm not that. I'm not going to argue about it with men in a room again, okay? Like, Jordan played for UNC, and I'm a Duke fan, so like it's kind of like, I don't want to wear Jordans because of whatever. But man, these Jordan 4s, they came out in 1989. I was 6 years old. I had no idea sneakers even existed to this magnitude, right? But now that I'm old, Corey says I'm young, but now that I'm still young but going to be old soon, like they're just like the most, like they look retro. They're like that's like classic retro with all this with it. So if that ever happened, and I ever spent the money and went out and got this, man, you guys would get sick of seeing them. You're like, oh, he's wearing the Jordan 4s again, right? Because they would be like in a locker back there, and I would just put them on like house shoes and wear them out. Sanctified, right? I would, unto the Lord, these are the Lord's shoes now, right? They would only be on this stage if it's clean enough, Corey. They would be sanctified. Now, I wouldn't wear them out to play in the yard or the park with the kids. I wouldn't mow the yard with them. I would just wear them like holy slippers, right? And I might be struck by lightning here in a little bit. I'm taking this a little too far. But I think it's safe to say that Jesus was much less petty and much more intentional with his disciples than I can be with shoes. He's praying to his Father that his disciples would be sanctified, set aside. What does that mean? Sanctified. So they just need to be in a lockbox somewhere backstage? They need to be protected from every little scuff and crease and all of that? No. Not kept from the mud and the muck and the rain of the world, but in the world. Consecrated, but used. Set aside, but sent. Covered in the dust of humanity as Jesus was, but not consumed by it. Rugged and real on the outside, but a remnant with the joy of the Lord on the inside. Scars and creases of a broken world. Just look at how the disciples all died. Secured and sanctified on the inside. In the world, not of the world. He sends his disciples into the world with a mission, just as he did. He said, Father, just as you've sent me into this world, I now send them. And you can imagine if they had their heads bowed at all, they might have gone, wait a second, what? You're leaving and sending? Jesus came with a mission from the Father. Now the disciples walk away from the empty tomb. Jesus paves the way for us to follow. And although the path is narrow, it's a worthy journey. I don't think any of the disciples raised their heads from this prayer and were like, okay, what do we do now, right? All right, what's the next thing on the agenda? Jesus' prayer didn't end with them wondering what they were supposed to do. They didn't need a bracelet or an app notification to tell them, now it's time to go. They were being protected. They knew he had prayed for their protection, guarded by God's joy. They were being kept and known by their joy in chaos. They were being sanctified. They were being set apart as servants of the world, but not slaves to the world. They're being formed in the likeness of Jesus in a world that grows more and more hostile to holiness. They were being sent. Just as Jesus was sent into the world, and just as the disciples would be sent, we are sent. And we have